The stars looked different from the observation deck of the USS Defender. Commander Eli Fisher stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring into the vast darkness. After 15 years in space, he still found the view humbling. "Commander, you should see this," called Lieutenant Susan Wright from her station. Her fingers moved quickly across the glowing control panel. Eli walked over and leaned down to look at the screen. "What am I looking at, Lieutenant?" "Something strange, sir." The long-range sensors picked up an object moving toward our solar system. "It's big and it's fast," Eli frowned. "Natural or artificial?" "Definitely artificial." "And, sir?" Susan hesitated. "It's changing course. Natural objects don't do that." Eli straightened up. "Send the data to Earth Command, then get Captain Moore up here." In another part of the galaxy, aboard the massive ship known as the Hunt Leader, High Hunter Kraziel studied the information his scouts had gathered about the third planet in this new solar system. His scaled skin reflected the blue light of the display, and his amber eyes narrowed as he reviewed the findings. "These humans are physically inferior," said Sub-Commander Lyrax, standing at attention beside him. "They have no natural weapons, no claws, no armor, weak teeth." Kraziel clicked his talons against the metal table. "And yet they have spread across their system. They have machines that extend their reach." "Still prey," Lyrax said confidently. "Just clever prey. We have seen this before." The Azareth had conquered 3 other sentient species across 2 star systems. Each time they had followed the sacred path of the hunt. First contact, assessment of prey, then the glorious chase and eventual submission. It was their way, encoded in their very biology as apex predators. "The hunting will be good," Kraziel agreed. "Prepare the first communication. Let us see how they respond to the presence of a superior species." Back on Earth, Dr. Grace Miller sat in the hastily assembled meeting room at Earth Defense Headquarters. As the leading xenolinguist, she had been called in the moment the alien signal had been detected. Around her sat military personnel, politicians, and other scientists, all looking equally concerned. "The translation is preliminary," Grace said, "but the message is clear enough. They're calling themselves the Azareth, and they're essentially telling us to prepare for their arrival." She paused. "They refer to us as worthy prey." General William Scott leaned forward, his weathered face tight with concern. "Are we sure about that translation, Doctor? Prey has a specific meaning." "I've run it through the system 3 times, Grace confirmed. "They see us as food, or at least as something to be hunted." Captain Alan Moore, freshly arrived from the USS Defender, spoke up. "The object Lieutenant Wright detected is now confirmed to be their ship. It's massive, about the size of Manhattan, and it's not alone. Our deep space telescopes have identified 2 more similar vessels following behind it." The room fell silent, as the implications sank in. "What are our options?" asked the Defense Secretary. "I suggest we attempt peaceful communication," Grace said. "Perhaps prey has cultural connotations we don't understand. We shouldn't jump to conclusions." "General." Scott nodded reluctantly. "Dr. Miller, prepare a response, but simultaneously, I want all Earth defenses on high alert. Captain Moore, your ship will be our first line of contact." 3 days later, Commander Fisher and Lieutenant Wright stood on the bridge of the USS Defender, watching as the enormous alien ship came into visual range. It was unlike anything humans had built, sleek and predatory in appearance with what looked like massive forward-facing sensors reminiscent of eyes. "It's beautiful, in a terrifying way," Susan whispered. Eli didn't respond. He was focused on the smaller craft that had detached from the main ship and was now approaching them. "Captain, they're hailing us," the communications officer reported. Captain Moore took a deep breath. On screen, the view screen flickered to life, and for the first time, humans saw the Azareth. The alien stood nearly 7 feet tall, with a body covered in iridescent scales that shifted between blue and green. Its face was vaguely reptilian, with forward-facing eyes that gleamed with intelligence. Most striking were the claws, curved and clearly designed for tearing flesh. "I am Sub-Hunter Vector," the alien announced, its mouth moving strangely around the human words. You will present yourselves to High Hunter Krasil. Captain Moore stepped forward. I am Captain Alan Moore of Earth. We received your transmission and wish to establish peaceful relations. The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. Peace is for equals. The hunt has already begun. This is merely courtesy. Before Moore could respond, the alien transmission cut off. Sir, Susan called out urgently, they're moving toward Mars colony. The next hours were chaos. The Azareth ships bypassed the Defender entirely, moving with incredible speed toward the human colony on Mars. Earth's defenses scrambled, but they were too slow, too unprepared. The Mars colony had 5,000 people, scientists, engineers, families. By the time Earth forces could respond, the Azareth had already struck. Their weapons easily penetrated the colony's defenses. The survivors described scenes of horror, Azareth warriors moving through the habitat, domes, hunting humans as if for sport. In the emergency command center on Earth, Dr. Grace Miller watched the reports come in with growing horror. They're not just attacking, she said quietly to General Scott. They're hunting us. Literally hunting us. Can you establish communication? Scott asked, his voice tight with controlled fury. I've been trying, Grace replied. They respond, but they're not interested in dialogue. They keep referring to the sacred hunt and proving our worth as predators. On the observation deck of the USS Defender, now racing back toward Mars, Eli Fisher watched the recordings from the colony's security cameras. His hands clenched into fists as he saw an Azareth warrior corner a group of human engineers, the alien clearly taking pleasure in their fear. They think we're prey, he said to Susan, who stood silently beside him. They genuinely believe we're just animals to be hunted. What do we do, Commander? Susan asked, her voice steady despite the fear evident in her eyes. Eli turned to look at her, his expression hardening with determination. We show them they're wrong, he said. They think they're predators? Fine. Let's show them what happens when they hunt humans. As the USS Defender approached Mars, Earth Command issued a formal declaration of war against the Azareth. But in his heart, Eli knew this wasn't a war. It was something older, something primal, a contest between hunter and hunted. And the Azareth had no idea that humans had millennia of experience being both. The attack on Mars was just the beginning. Within a week, the Azareth had destroyed 3 space stations and damaged Earth's moonbase. Their ships moved faster than anything in the human fleet. Their weapons cut through human defenses like they were made of paper. Major Frank Collins stared at the tactical display in Earth Command's war room. Red markers showed Azareth positions advancing across the solar system, while blue markers, human defenses, blinked out one by one. This isn't working, Frank said to the room of tired officers. We're fighting them like they're an enemy army, but they don't think like soldiers. They think like hunters. General Scott rubbed his eyes. Explain, Frank pointed to the display. Look at their attack patterns. They don't secure territory or establish supply lines. They strike at vulnerable targets, create fear, then move on to fresh hunting grounds. They're treating this like a sport. Dr. Grace Miller, who had been quietly taking notes in the corner, spoke up. That fits with what we've learned about their biology. The Azareth evolved as pack hunters on their home world. Hunting isn't just how they get food, it's central to their culture and social structure. So how do we fight them? Asked General Scott. Before anyone could answer, a young woman stepped forward from the back of the room. We stop acting like prey. All eyes turned to the newcomer. She wore the uniform of a civilian contractor with O. Garcia on her name badge. You are? General Scott asked. Olivia Garcia, sir, engineering specialist. I've been analyzing the sensor data from the Mars attack. She moved to the display and brought up new images. The Azareth have physical advantages. They're stronger, faster, have natural weapons, but look here. She pointed to footage showing an Azareth warrior pursuing a human through the Mars colony corridors. They rely on instinct. When humans run in a straight line, the Azareth catch them easily. But in the few cases where humans used unexpected tactics, she switched to another clip showing a colonist who had doubled back behind an Azareth. The aliens were momentarily confused. Frank leaned forward with interest. They expect us to act like prey. Exactly, Olivia said. And that's their weakness. On the USS Defender, now stationed near Jupiter, Commander Eli Fisher received the new tactical guidelines from Earth Command. He gathered his crew on the bridge. From now on, we fight differently, he told them. Forget everything you know about conventional warfare. The Azareth aren't soldiers, they're predators, and we need to be something they've never hunted before. Lieutenant, Susan Wright raised her hand. How do we do that, sir? Eli smiled grimly. We start by setting a trap. Predators expect prey to run and hide. We're going to do the opposite. The plan was risky. The USS Defender would appear damaged and vulnerable, drifting near Europa. Intelligence suggested the Azareth couldn't resist such easy prey. Captain Moore had objected to using his ship as bait, but ultimately agreed it was their best chance to capture an Azareth alive, something Earth desperately needed to understand their new enemy. Dr. Paul Richardson, Earth's leading xenobiologist, had joined the Defender for this mission. He stood beside Eli in the ship's lab, preparing containment measures for their hoped-for captive. If we can study one up close, Paul said, we might find biological weaknesses. Every predator has blind spots. Let's hope so, Eli replied. Because right now they're beating us at every turn. The ship's alert system flashed. Susan's voice came over the comm. Commander, Azareth scout ship approaching. They've taken the bait. Eli and Paul hurried to the bridge where the crew was enacting their carefully rehearsed plan. The ship's lights dimmed to emergency levels. Fake damage reports flooded the open communications channels. The Defender was broadcasting its vulnerability to the approaching hunters. Hold positions, Eli ordered as the Azareth ship came into view on the screen. It was smaller than their main vessels, sleek and deadly-looking. Remember, we need at least one alive. The Azareth ship docked with surprising gentleness. They were confident, not expecting any resistance. Ship sensors showed 5 Azureth boarding through the airlock. They've entered Section 4, Susan reported, moving exactly as predicted. The trap was layered. The first level looked like frightened humans retreating. The second level was a kill box designed to take down most of the hunting party. The third level was a specialized containment field designed by Dr. Richardson to capture one Azareth without harming it. Over the next 15 minutes, the plan unfolded. The sounds of energy weapons echoed through the ship. Status reports flowed. In 3 Azareth down, then a 4th. The last one is headed for the containment area, Susan announced. On the security feed, they watched as the final Azureth warrior, realizing it had been trapped, fought with incredible ferocity. It moved faster than seemed possible, claws, slashing through metal panels like they were cloth. But finally it stepped into the invisible containment field. Energy shimmered, and the alien froze, held in a stasis bubble. We got one, Eli breathed. Back on Earth, Dr. Grace Miller and Olivia Garcia worked around the clock studying everything they could about Azureth psychology and behavior. The data from the captured alien, identified as Sub-Hunter Vector, proved invaluable. Their society is built entirely around hunting prowess, Grace explained to the War Council. They don't just hunt for food or territory, they hunt because it defines their worth. A successful hunter rises in status. An unsuccessful one is shamed, Olivia added. And they've never failed a hunt before. They've conquered every species they've encountered by treating them as prey. They literally can't conceive of prey that fights back effectively. On Jupiter's moon, Callisto, High Hunter Krasiel raged at his subordinates. The loss of Vector and his hunting party was unprecedented. How could prey trap predators, he demanded, his claws digging into the metal table. Sub-Commander Lyrax stood rigidly. The humans are more cunning than we anticipated. They learn quickly. They are still prey, Krasiel snarled. We will show them their place. He turned to his War Council. Prepare the fleet. We will strike their moon base with overwhelming force. No more small hunting parties. We will crush them with our full might. As the Azurith prepared their largest assault yet, humans across the solar system were implementing new strategies. Major Frank Collins trained special response teams in anti-predator tactics. Dr. Richardson developed sensory weapons designed to confuse Azurith hunting instincts. Captain Moore and Commander Fisher prepared a desperate defense of the moon base, knowing it would be the next target. And in a secure lab on Earth, Dr. Grace Miller attempted something unprecedented: communication with the captured vector. Not as predator to prey, but as one intelligent species to another. "You hunt us because that's all you know," she said to the contained alien. "But we aren't prey, and soon your people will learn that the hard way." Vector stared at her with alien eyes. For the first time in his life, a seed of doubt formed in his predator's mind. The moon base shook as another Azurith ship fired upon it. Warning lights flashed throughout the command center where Commander Eli Fisher coordinated the defense. "Shield 4 is failing," reported a young officer. "Redirect power from secondary systems," Eli ordered. He turned to Lieutenant Susan Wright. "How much longer until the new defense system is online?" 10 minutes, sir," she replied, fingers flying across her control panel. Dr. Richardson's team is finishing the calibrations now. Outside, the vast darkness of space was filled with flashes of light as human ships engaged the Azurith fleet. The alien vessels moved with frightening speed and precision. Yet something had changed since their earlier attacks. The humans were no longer easy targets. Captain Alan Moore's voice came through the comm system. "Commander, we've implemented the new evasion patterns. The Azurith are having trouble predicting our movements." "Good," Eli said. "Keep them confused until we're ready." On Earth, Dr. Grace Miller sat across from Vector, the captured Azurith warrior. After weeks of careful communication, she had established a tentative rapport with the alien. Today, she needed answers. "Your fleet is attacking our moon base," she said. "Many will die on both sides. Help me understand why this hunt is so important to your people." Vector's scaled skin shimmered under the lab lights. His claws, now unbound but carefully monitored, tapped against the table between them. "The hunt defines us," he explained. "From birth, we are taught that the universe is divided into predators and prey. To be predator is to be worthy. To be prey is to be food or servant," he paused. "It has always been this way." "And if the prey defeats the predator?" Grace asked. Vector's amber eyes narrowed. "This does not happen." Grace leaned forward. "It's happening now." At that moment, in the research lab near Earth Command, Olivia Garcia and Dr. Paul Richardson made a breakthrough. They had been studying Azurith biology based on scans of Vector and tissue samples from fallen warriors. "Look at this," Paul said excitedly, pointing to a display showing the structure of Azurith eyes. "Their visual processing is incredibly advanced for movement and depth perception, perfect for tracking prey, but they have almost no ability to process certain light frequencies." Olivia grinned. "So if we modulate our weapons and shields to operate in those frequencies, they'll be effectively blind to them," Paul finished. Olivia immediately called Major Frank Collins. "We have something," she said. "It could change everything." Back on the moon base, the new defense system finally came online. Engineer Steve Bennett, who had been working non-stop to implement the modifications, gave Eli a thumbs up from across the command center. "System ready, Commander," he announced. "Activate now," Eli ordered, "and signal all ships to switch to the new frequency." Outside, the battle shifted in an instant. The modified shields of the human ships now pulsed with energy that the Azurith sensors couldn't properly detect. Their weapons, recalibrated to the same frequency, struck Azurith ships that suddenly couldn't track them effectively. On the Azurith command ship, High Hunter Kraziel roared in frustration. "What trickery is this?" he demanded. "The prey vessels are disappearing from our screens." Subcommander Lyrax studied the data with growing concern. "They've found a weakness in our sensory systems. They're exploiting a blind spot we didn't know we had." "Impossible," Kraziel snarled. "Prey does not study predator. Prey runs. Prey hides." "These humans don't," Lyrax said quietly. "They adapt." For the first time in Azareth history, a hunting fleet retreated. 7 of their ships had been damaged or destroyed, while the human forces had survived with minimal losses. As the alien vessels pulled back to their base on Callisto, uncertainty spread through their ranks. On Earth, Vector watched the reports of the battle with fascination. Grace had allowed him to see the outcome, curious about his reaction. "This has never happened before," he said, his voice a mix of confusion and reluctant admiration. "No prey species has ever driven back an Azareth hunting party." "That's because we're not prey," Grace replied. "Humans evolved differently than your species. We weren't always at the top of our food chain. For millions of years, we were hunted by predators larger and faster than ourselves." Vector's head tilted in curiosity. "Yet you survived." "We more than survived. We became the dominant species on our planet, not through strength or speed, but through intelligence and cooperation. We studied our predators, we learned their weaknesses, and eventually we surpassed them." This concept seemed to deeply disturb the Azareth. The natural order is predator above prey. "No," Grace said firmly. "The natural order is adaptation. Those who adapt, survive. Those who don't, perish. Your people have been apex predators for so long you've stopped adapting. Humans never stop." At Earth Command, the victory at the moon base had raised morale considerably. Major Collins stood before the assembled military leadership, presenting the next phase of their strategy. "The Azareth think like predators, so we need to stop thinking like prey," he explained. "Predators are used to prey that runs away in predictable patterns. We're going to do the opposite. We're going to run toward them." General Scott looked skeptical. "You want to attack their base on Callisto? After one defensive victory?" "Not just attack," Frank said. "We're going to hunt the hunters." On the USS Defender, now fully repaired and upgraded with the new technology, Commander Fisher briefed his crew on their mission. "We've been selected to lead the strike force," he told them. "This won't be a conventional attack. We're going to use everything we've learned about Azareth psychology against them." Lieutenant Wright raised a concern. "Sir, even with our new advantages, they're still physically superior. If it comes to close combat." "That's why we won't fight on their terms," Eli replied. "Predators expect prey to behave in certain ways. When we don't follow the script, they become confused, even frightened." As human forces prepared for their first offensive operation, Vector made an unexpected request to Dr. Miller. "I wish to communicate with High Hunter Krasil," he said. Grace was surprised. "Why?" "Because this hunt is folly," Vector replied. "Your species is not what we thought. You are not prey. You are something else, something we have never encountered before." He looked directly at her with those alien eyes. "If my people continue this hunt, I fear they will be the ones who are hunted in the end." As the human fleet departed for Jupiter, a new understanding was forming. This was not a war between equals. It was not even a war between predator and prey. It was a contest between two fundamentally different evolutionary paths. One that led to physical supremacy, and one that led to adaptability and intelligence, and only one path would lead to survival. The journey to Callisto took 3 days. Commander Eli Fisher used this time to prepare his crew for what would be humanity's first offensive against the Azareth. The USS Defender led a fleet of 5 ships, all upgraded with the new technology that exploited Azareth sensory weaknesses. "We're not just fighting to defend ourselves anymore," Eli told his officers during their final briefing. "We're fighting to show the Azareth that their way of thinking is flawed. We need to change how they see us." Lieutenant Susan Wright studied the holographic display of Callisto and the Azareth base. "The base has 3 main sections," she explained. "Their command center, their living quarters, and their ship docks. Our primary target is the command center." "And our primary objective?" asked Steve Bennett, now serving as the ship's chief engineer after his success with the defensive systems. "Capture, not kill," Eli replied firmly. "We want High Hunter Krasil alive." On Earth, Dr. Grace Miller prepared Vector for his role in the mission. The Azareth warrior had agreed to help, believing it was the only way to save his species from a disastrous path. "Your message has been transmitted to the fleet," Grace told him. "But we don't know if Krasil will listen." "He will not," Vector said with certainty. "His position depends on the success of this hunt. To admit humans are not prey would destroy his status." He flexed his claws in a gesture Grace had come to recognize as frustration. But others in the command structure might hear reason. The human fleet arrived at Callisto under the cover of Jupiter's shadow. Thanks to their modified shields, they remained undetected until they were almost upon the Azurith base. "They've spotted us," Susan reported as alarms began to sound across the ship. "Azurith vessels launching to intercept. Implement evasion pattern Delta," Eli ordered. "All ships activate sensory countermeasures." What followed was unlike any battle in human or Azurith history. The human ships moved in ways that defied Predator logic. Instead of fleeing from the more powerful Azurith vessels, they charged directly at them, then veered away at the last moment. Instead of trying to hide, they made themselves more visible, but only on certain frequencies, creating sensor ghosts that confused Azurith targeting systems. On the Azurith command base, High Hunter Krasil watched in growing rage as his fleet struggled against the smaller human force. "They fight like madness," he snarled. "No prey behaves this way." Subcommander Lyrax studied the battle with different eyes. The human tactics were not random or desperate as Krasil believed. They were deliberate, calculated to exploit Azurith hunting instincts. "High Hunter," Lyrax said cautiously, "I believe we should consider Vector's message. These humans may not be what we thought." "Treason," Krasil roared, his claws extended in threat. "Vector is compromised. He has been corrupted by the prey. We are Azurith. We are the ultimate predators of the galaxy." As they argued, the battle outside shifted. 3 human ships engaged the Azurith fleet, while the USS Defender and 1 other vessel broke away, heading directly for the base. "They're using our own hunting tactics against us," Lyrax realized aloud. "Distracting the main force while a smaller group targets the vulnerable spot." Krasil finally saw it too, but it was too late. The Defender had already begun its approach to the base's docking area. Aboard the Defender, Eli led the strike team personally. 6 humans in specialized combat suits designed by Dr. Richardson to confuse Azurith senses. Each suit emitted light, frequencies the Azurith couldn't process well, making the humans appear blurry and indistinct to alien eyes. "Remember your training," Eli told the team as they prepared to board. "Don't run straight. Move unpredictably. Use the disruptor weapons, only when necessary. Our goal is to reach the command center with minimal casualties on either side." The team moved through the Azurith base like ghosts. When they encountered Azurith warriors, they used tactics developed by Major Collins, movements and positions that confused predator instincts. They didn't hide behind cover as expected, but stood in open spaces at angles that made targeting difficult. They didn't flee when charged, but stepped sideways or toward the attacker. The confused Azurith missed more often than they hit. And when they did connect, the humans' new armor absorbed much of the damage. Meanwhile on Earth, Vector watched the mission unfold through the data feed Dr. Miller had provided. His amber eyes widened as he saw humans using knowledge of Azurith psychology as a weapon more effective than any gun. "They learn," he said quietly. "They adapt faster than any species we have encountered." Grace nodded. "It's our greatest strength, not our bodies, but our minds." Back on Callisto, Eli's team reached the command center. They breached the doors using precisely placed charges that exploited weaknesses in Azurith construction. Another insight gained from Vector's cooperation. Inside, they found Krasil and his command staff. The High Hunter stood tall, his claws extended. A fearsome sight even to humans who knew what to expect. "So prey comes to the predator's den," he growled. "Brave but foolish." Eli stepped forward. "We are not prey, Krasil, and this isn't a hunt anymore. It's a conversation." He gestured around at the command center, now firmly under human control. "A conversation you will have with Earth leadership." Before Krasil could respond, Sub-Commander Lyrax stepped between them. "High Hunter, the humans have defeated our defenses using our own hunting principles against us. They have proven themselves worthy of respect, if not as equals." "Never." Kraziel snarled, and in a blur of motion he launched himself at Eli. What happened next would be remembered in both human and Azereth histories. Instead of dodging or raising his weapon, Eli stood his ground. As Kraziel's claws came within inches of his throat, Eli activated a small device Dr. Richardson had developed. A pulse of energy targeted specifically to Azereth biology burst outward. Kraziel froze mid-leap, his muscles temporarily paralyzed. He crashed to the floor, conscious but unable to move. "We studied you," Eli said, looking down at the fallen hunter. "We learned how you think, how you perceive, how your bodies work. We did what prey never does. We understood the predator better than the predator understood itself." The capture of Kraziel and the Callisto base marked a turning point in the conflict. For the first time, a significant number of Azereth began to question their assumptions about humans. Led by Lyrax, a faction emerged that advocated for reassessment. Eli supervised the securing of the base. He received a communication from Earth. It was Dr. Miller with Vector beside her. "Commander," Grace said, "Vector has something he wants to tell you." The Azereth warrior looked directly at Eli through the screen. "You have done what no prey has ever done. You have turned the hunt against the hunters." He paused, struggling with a concept foreign to his kind. Perhaps we have both been wrong. Neither predator nor prey, but something else entirely." As the human fleet secured their position on Callisto, a new possibility emerged. Not victory or defeat in the traditional sense, but understanding. The Azereth had begun their campaign certain of humanity's place in the natural order. Now, that certainty was shattered, and in its place, a question formed. What happens when predators meet a species that refuses to be prey? 2 weeks after the capture of Callisto Base, Earth prepared for a historic meeting. The Great Hall of the United Earth Government had been modified to accommodate both human and Azereth physiologies. Security was tight but not overwhelming, a deliberate choice to show trust. Commander Eli Fisher stood near the entrance, watching as delegates arrived. He wore his formal uniform, the medals from the recent conflict catching the light. Beside him, Lieutenant Susan Wright seemed nervous. "Do you think this will actually work?" she asked quietly. "It has to," Eli replied. "The alternative is a war that could destroy both our species." The doors opened to admit the Azereth delegation. Sub-Commander Lyrax, now acting High Hunter, led the group. Behind him came 4 other Azereth officials, their scaled skin gleaming under Earth's lights. They moved with the natural grace of predators, but their posture showed restraint, awareness. Across the room, Dr. Grace Miller stood with Vector. The former prisoner was now officially the first Azereth ambassador to Earth. It was a position that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. General Scott approached Eli. "The security team is nervous about having so many Azereth in one room," he said in a low voice, "especially with most of Earth's leadership present." "They're not here to hunt," Eli assured him. "They're here because they've realized hunting isn't the answer." The conference began with formal introductions. Acting High Hunter Lyrax stepped forward, his amber eyes scanning the room before settling on the human leadership. "We come without claws extended," he said, using an Azereth expression Vector had taught the human translators. "We come to speak, not to hunt." Earth's President Lisa Chen nodded. "We welcome you in peace and hope for understanding between our peoples." The real discussions began afterward. The humans had prepared carefully, setting up the room to avoid triggering Azereth hunting instincts. No one moved suddenly. Voices stayed calm and measured. It was a dance of diplomacy unlike any in human history, negotiating with a species that had evolved as apex predators. At the center of the talks was the question of Kraziel. The former High Hunter remained in human custody, still insisting that the natural order required the Azereth to dominate. What do your people want done with him? President Chen asked Lyrax. The Azareth leader's expression was hard to read for humans, but Vector translated the subtle shifts in his posture. He wishes to say this is complicated, Vector explained. In Azareth culture, a hunter who fails so completely would traditionally be removed from the pack. Executed? Eli asked sharply. Yes, Vector confirmed. But Lyrax believes this would be a mistake. Kraziel represents the old thinking. He should live to see the new way. In a private room elsewhere in the building, Olivia Garcia and Dr. Paul Richardson met with Azareth scientists. Their task was perhaps the most important, finding a way for two fundamentally different species to coexist. Your technology focuses on exploitation of resources, the lead Azareth scientist observed. Ours focuses on pursuit and capture. Together they could create something new. Olivia nodded eagerly. We've already seen how combining our approaches has led to breakthroughs. Your sensory technology is far more advanced than ours, while our adaptive systems offer flexibility your people haven't explored. Back in the main conference, Lyrax was making a surprising proposal. We wish to establish a permanent embassy on Earth, with Vector as our first ambassador. And we invite humans to send representatives to our homeworld. President Chen looked surprised. This is more than we expected, Acting High Hunter. We have learned much about humans, Lyrax replied. You are not prey, as we first thought. You are not predators like us either. You are adapters. This quality is valuable and worthy of respect. After hours of discussion, the framework of a peace treaty began to take shape. The Azareth would withdraw their fleet from human space. Humans would share their adaptive technologies. Both species would establish regular communication and cultural exchanges. As the formal talks concluded for the day, Eli found himself standing near a window overlooking Earth's capital city. Vector approached him, moving with the careful deliberation he had adopted around humans. Your kind has changed mine forever, the Azareth said. Eli smiled slightly. I think we've changed each other. There are still those among my people who believe as Kraziel does, Vector warned. They see any relationship besides hunter and hunted as unnatural. We have those types too, Eli admitted. People who fear anything different, but they don't determine our future. Later that evening, a smaller gathering took place. Dr. Grace Miller had arranged for key individuals from both sides to meet informally. The tension that had filled the official meeting was notably absent here. Grace raised a glass in toast to understanding between different paths of evolution. Lyrax mimicked the gesture with his own drink, to seeing with new eyes. As the evening progressed, Eli found himself in conversation with both Susan and an Azareth scientist. What still puzzles us, the Azareth admitted, is how your species became dominant on your world without the physical advantages of a top predator. Susan laughed. We weren't always on top. For most of our history, we were the ones being hunted. That experience shaped us, Eli added. We learned to observe predators, to think like them, to predict them. Eventually, we learned to outthink them. And now you have outthought us, the Azareth said with a gesture that Vector had explained was respect. The peace treaty was signed 3 days later. It wasn't perfect. Both sides had compromises to make and prejudices to overcome. But it was a beginning. In the years that followed, both species would learn from each other. Azareth hunting instincts, when channeled properly, led to breakthroughs in exploration and resource discovery. Human adaptability helped the Azareth evolve beyond their rigid hierarchies. On the day the first joint human-Azareth space mission launched, Commander Eli Fisher, now Admiral Fisher, stood with Vector watching the ship rise into the sky. They thought they were predators, Eli said quietly. Vector finished the thought. And you proved them wrong. You showed us a different way to see the universe. He turned his amber eyes to Eli, not as hunters and prey, but as fellow travelers. The ship disappeared into the blue sky, carrying with it the promise of what two different evolutionary paths could accomplish together. Not through strength alone, not through adaptation alone, but through the power of understanding.